Have you ever noticed how after you see an artist live, their music just sounds so different? Like it's the same songs, same recordings, but something's not the same anymore. Well, here's why that happens, and here's why it's such a big deal for ADHD brains. So what happens in the brain when we are watching live music? Well, four things primarily happen in the brain. First and foremost, we get an increase of dopamine. Secondarily, we get an increase of oxytocin. Thirdly, we get a decrease of cortisol. And fourth, we get this crazy thing called brainwave entrainment. So in non-nerd terms, what does that mean? Well, more dopamine means that not only are you more motivated, but you also are actually able to learn and retain things better. Oxytocin increases the amount of trust, openness, and connection that we have with the people around us. And decreasing the cortisol in our system allows us to decrease stress, which then allows us to have better focus. Lastly, this brainwave entrainment thing means that your brain waves actually start to sync to the rhythm. And then because everyone else's waves are also syncing to the rhythm, you're actually starting to sync up in how your brain is processing with everyone around you. What this means is it literally creates group cohesion. So the nerdy part of all this is that they ran a bunch of studies and they found that in these EEG studies, when musicians perform together, their brainwaves synchronize, particularly around the alpha and the theta bands, which are tied to relaxation and attention and focus. What's really interesting is that when they checked out the audiences listening to this as well, they found out that they also had intersubject neural synchrony, which is just a fancy way of saying their brains were responding in similar patterns. In ensemble playing, musicians' prefrontal and motor cortexes fire in sync, especially when they're making eye contact, which allows them to play together. One of the reasons that this brainwave entrainment thing, where our brains actually start to sync up with rhythms, is so powerful inside of live music is that in addition to having the actual beat of the drums or whatever the music is doing, we also have these rhythm and social signals like watching people play, those cues that we get from interacting with those around us, and so it enhances the effect. So why does this matter for the ADHD brain? Well, ADHD brains often end up struggling with self-regulation, which if you've got ADHD isn't a surprise. They can especially struggle in things like attention, mood, and transitions. And live music taps into external regulation mechanisms: rhythm, emotional resonance, social bonding, which means that it supports things like focus, motivation, and social openness or social connection. All areas where ADHD brains typically need a little bit of help. So if ADHD brains tend to struggle with emotional regulation, task initiation, and a disconnect in social circles, live music provides immediate emotional regulation by helping increase the production of dopamine and oxytocin. Because those two things increase, we are able to focus better, and because of the brain entrainment, we are also able to focus better. And because oxytocin is climbing, we are also able to connect better and trust better with the group we are experiencing with. This is why you can go to a concert and you didn't know the people to your right or left before the beginning of the evening, but at the end of it, you're planning like trips to Mardi Gras next year. In 2022, I opened the Grow Retreat, our flagship event, with live music, and I didn't know the details of what I've just walked you through, but I did get to see the impact immediately. We had a group that was a little bit nervous about being in a room full of other people still, who went from being a little bit nervous and reserved and like nervous laughs to connecting intimately almost instantly. And when I started to look into why, and I realized how impactful it truly was, we started to use it to open every single one of our live events because it helps create a situation where people can retain what they learn, but they can also do something with it and they're motivated to do something with it. Okay, so how do we do something with this inside of our day-to-day? Well, you may not always have a live violinist on hand unless you happen to play and you can anyhow, but there are some things you can do. First, cue up some recordings of live performances and not studio tracks because your brain actually prefers those little imperfections. It makes it feel more authentic. Secondly, if you have been interested in learning an instrument, this is a great excuse to make that happen, especially if you have a partner that you can play along with, because even if you're not great at it for starters, it still is going to help with training your brain. And third, start integrating going to live music events regularly. Whether these are small concerts, open mics, jam sessions, doesn't really matter. Do it weekly, do it monthly, I don't care. But do yourself the favor, you are worth giving yourself this support. Your brain is more powerful and more trainable than most of us give it credit for. Don't underestimate the impact of live music on your motivation, your focus, and your ability to connect to others. And hey, if you want to experience it for yourself, we've always got a Grow Retreat coming up next January. Check out thegrowretreat.com and see if it's a fit for you.